All right. Hello and welcome to this episode. We're going to talk about stress and how it impacts the body. And so my name's Matt Cotty, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And on this episode, I want to continue our conversation on stress that we've been having in this series. So we talked about, the three types of stress and understanding how with psychological stress, our mind is essentially creating these scenarios that is putting us in this perpetual state of stress, right? Or this chronic state of stress. And that's one of the unique challenges that, people face at this period of time in humanity is that we are living in a chronic state of stress. Now, it may be a lower level of stress than, let's say, life and death situations. And while there are people that live in those kind of situations in this world, if you live in, the States or, a more first world kind of nation, so to speak, in these cases, you're probably not facing life and death scenarios all the time. But that doesn't mean you're not facing stress, right? Because what we've done is we've created this very fast pace of living where people just never turn off, right? You're going to work, from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, or maybe even you're working two jobs, right? Because cost of living is just really high wherever you are. And then, you have your children and, your marriage or your relationships, right? And then you're navigating social, relationships. And then you start stacking all these other things like, being on call 24/7 at work, or just people being able to access you all the time. And then social media where you're always tuned into that. And all these things are, little stressors that you're dealing with. And because they just stack and stack and stack and stack, your body can actually be in a perpetual state of stress, right? And that looks different for everyone. So, the examples I listed, that might not be your specific story, and that's okay, because really what it's about figuring out is what are the stressors in your life? What are the major ones? And more importantly, how do you navigate them? Because stress is an inevitable part of life, right? I mean, it's gonna happen, but it also depends on what we do with it, in our own minds. And do we, do things to cope with it? Do we do things to, release stress from our body? Do we do things, to perpetuate it? Do we suppress it, right? All these questions, right? And so what I want to talk about in this episode is I just want to talk about how stress can impact the body. Because what we need to understand is the fight or flight response, or the stress response, again, is designed for the short term, right? So our body goes into this state of survival. And when it does that, a lot of functions happen in your body, right? Your awareness is going to intensify, right? And so in many cases, when you are stressed about something, you're going to see it in other places of your life, right? You're going to be hyper vigilant to it. And then also like your body goes into survival mode. So it does things like it pumps blood into your major extremities, right? Your arms and legs, so you can run and fight, better, right? But it also suppresses different parts of your body that are designed for more long-term functioning, right? So, things like digesting food, right? Your body actually suppresses that specific, or, it slows down that function, right? Because your body's going into like, hey, we need to live right now. We don't need to worry about processing food. We can worry about that later. But what we need to understand is like even something as simple as digestion, right? And digestive problems can be a symptom of, chronic stress in our life, right? So, and that's why conditions, like IBS and things like that, right? It's like those conditions are tied and correlated to, stress, right? And ulcers and obviously stuff like that. Because what's happening is your body's in this survival state for too long, and then there's secondary effects of having your body in that state for, a too long of a period, right? And so our ability to regulate and self-regulate, more importantly, like really get ourselves into a calm state, especially when nothing's happening right now, is so critical, not just for our own psychological well-being, but for our physical well-being, right? Because it's gonna take a toll physically on the body. Another area that gets impacted, right, is your libido or your sex drive, right? And like, because again, if you're in a survival state, you're not going to be thinking about reproducing, right? So that's going to be impacted as well. And, and there's just all these processes in the body that are very natural that again get impacted by a chronic level of stress. And so, and we can go ahead and link in. And like I said, the book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, I mean, he goes in detail, whether it's heart disease, right? Because your heart's pumping too fast, as well as clogged arteries and all these other things from high levels of cortisol. I mean, we can go list every single thing that is going on in the body, but the reality is the point of this episode, what I wanted to really dive into is the idea that when you're in a state of stress for a prolonged period of time, it's going to have negative impacts on your body, right? Not just mentally, but literally your physical body. And so, and that's why it's like, it makes no sense to me when people talk about like mental health and physical health, right? It's like, it's your whole health that we're really focusing on, right? And like at Restored Minds, it's not just, we don't just focus on mental health, but we realize how mental health also impacts our physical health as well as our emotional health and our spiritual health, right? And so when it comes to, our stress regulation, like that is such an important tool for us to learn as individuals, right? It's something that I think many of us ignore, or we use these coping mechanisms that are short-term fixes, but not in any way long-term helpful or healthy solutions, right? If you're using chemicals, right, whether it be, alcohol or marijuana or anything like that to cope with your stress, that doesn't help you with stress over long term, right? It just simply suppresses it over the short term. And then the same stress surfaces up once the effect of that chemical wears off, right? So your ability to navigate stress is important, not just for your own mental health, but also for the physical toll it takes on your body. And so what I want to do in this series, I want to talk about, some ways for self-regulation, right? As far as things you can be doing, to making sure that you're not creating more stress psychologically in your mind, right? We already have the regular things we have to deal with in our day-to-day life, but then there's also all the things that we add on mentally and how we cope with those things. So in this series, I just wanted to kind of just introduce the idea of the stress-body connection, right? And like, obviously it's connected, but I want to just talk about some of the major ways that can impact you and some of the things that you might start seeing in your own life that might be a good indicator, like, oh, hey, maybe I'm dealing with a little more stress than I'm even aware of, right? So, things like digestive problems, as well as, if you're noticing like heart palpitations and, just paying attention to your body. I mean, like, what an important reminder that is for us, especially just because we can get so lost in our distractions and so busy that we can even miss what the body's even telling us. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of cover that at a high level today with the stress and body connection. And then in the next episode, I want to talk about stress and depression, because I want to talk about how those are correlated. And then I finally want to dive into some self-regulation tips and techniques to make sure that you're handling your stress in a healthy way and allowing your body to process it, allowing your body to recover, because again, we want to focus on our long-term health as opposed to our short-term comfort. So thanks so much for taking the time to hang out today. And again, if you found it helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe and leave a comment on iTunes and just let us know any ideas for future episodes that you'd like us to make. And also we have some resources for you over at Restored Minds and down in the links below for additional trainings, as well as free meditations and other downloads you can take with you on your journey to, just navigate the regular stress and anxiety that we experience on a week-to-week basis. So thanks so much again for tuning in today, and I will see you guys next week as we continue this series on stress in the body and how it impacts us. So have a great week, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, chances are someone else will too, and we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing and also sharing this video on your social platforms. Also, if you're looking for additional help, we have some resources right down in the links below to help you on your journey. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you soon.